These shimmering decorated ovals are poached eggs in aspic. And here is a cold roast duck with cherries glittering in aspic, canard à la Montmorency. We're doing these recipes next time on The French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Safeway stores.
This shimmering, cunningly decorated sheath of aspic holds a poached egg. And here is duck decorated with cherries and aspic, glittering and shimmering. Lovely to look at, beautiful to eat, and we're going to make these both today on The French Chef. Welcome to The French Chef. I'm Julia Child. Today we're going to do a session on aspics. An aspic is any flavored liquid into which gelatin has been dissolved, and when it is chilled, it sets like this. And you can fill a little mold, a little oval tin mold, or a little glass dish with aspic and a poached egg, and when it's gelled, you unmold it, and you have an œuf en gelée, or an egg in aspic. And this is a cold roast duck, which we have placed on a platter, spooned aspic over, chilled, and decorated with cherries. These are great fun to do and not difficult, as you will see. If you look at this, it seems you might think, well, how could I ever do anything like that? But you're going to see it from the beginning. I'm going to now put these into the refrigerator so that they can stay cold. When you make an aspic, the only thing you have to be sure of is that you have plenty of ice and plenty of time, because you can't hurry an aspic. You can try hurrying it, but you won't get very far because it takes a certain amount of time to chill. So here's our duck, which has been chilled, and we have a platter that we're going to arrange the duck on, and it has about 1/8 of an inch of aspic on it, and that has been chilled, so it has set. Now, to make your aspic, you use a clear consommé, which you can make yourself, which is always very nice, or you can buy one of the very good brands of canned beef consommé, and then you simply add gelatin to it. And whether or not the label on the can says gelatin added, you will add gelatin in the following proportions. 2 cups of consommé, 1 envelope or tablespoon of gelatin. And you sprinkle it on the top of the cold consommé, and then you wait for about 4 or 5 minutes until it is dissolved. And then you stir it up over gentle heat. And in this, you just want to make very, very sure that every particle of gelatin has dissolved and melted. Otherwise, you'll have little granules of gelatin. And if you, by any chance, have done this too fast, and you notice that there are little granules of gelatin which don't seem to dissolve, simply wash out a piece of cheesecloth and put the damp cheesecloth over a sieve, and then strain your gelatin into a pan, and that will get rid of any little granules. And then after it's all been melted and is heated up, you will use wine flavoring if you like it. If you're doing a French type of aspic, you always would use wine flavoring. You can either use cognac or port or Madeira, and for 2 cups you put in about 2 tablespoons. I'm going to put in a little bit of each. And this is still when it's hot. And this small amount of alcohol and liqueur doesn't hurt the proportions of the gelatin at all, and then you taste it. And because the liquid is hot, that's very nice. And then because the liquid is hot, the alcohol evaporates, and then it's all ready to use. I've made a whole bunch of gelatin here, of jellied stock here, using the same method, because you often find when you're making an aspic that you don't have quite enough, and it's much better to make a whole lot of it, because you can keep it in the icebox or you can freeze it, and then it's all ready to use any time you'd like to use it. So we have our duck, which has been thoroughly chilled. One thing you always want to remember when you're doing an aspic, have everything cold, and then it goes very much faster. Now I've peeled this duck. Here's a piece that's unpeeled, and there's one that's peeled, because the duck is rather fat, and that is not particularly not pleasant when it's cold. And you just peel the skin off, and then there's a little fat layer there, and you just scrape it off. And then it's ready to use. This is a second joint. See, there's the bone there, and that makes a rather large serving piece, so I'm just going to cut it in half. And there's the drumstick. I've left a little bit of skin on that because it looks rather nice. And then you can arrange it in any artistic way you would like. I'm going to put the drumsticks at each end, and there's a piece of second joint. Try to follow as much as possible the contours of your dish. And there's the rest of the second joint there. I've got another piece of it there. And then here's the wing, and there's very little meat on the wing, so the thing to do is just cut it off. You can use the wing for decoration if you want, but there's so little meat on it that it's hardly worthwhile. And then when you have big pieces like that, you put that down underneath. I'm taking that little bit of fat off. And then the breast, I just cut the breast sort of slant ways that way. There's never as much meat on a duck as one would hope. But I'm putting the breast meat like that on the bottom, and then I'll put the beautiful slices on top. And this always looks rather dreary and naked when you first begin, but as you're going to see how we're going to build this up. There. And now, this is all cold, so we're going to spoon some aspic over it. Now, as I said, you want to have plenty of ice. Now, one thing I forgot to tell you, which is one of the most important things, is why it's a good idea to make your aspic ahead of time, is that you should test it out to see how it is. Put it in a little saucer and chill it, and then spoon it up and let it stand at room temperature. I've had this out since for about 10 minutes, and it's got to hold its shape. If it's too rubbery, you add a little consomme to it, and if it's not stiff enough, you add a little more gelatin, but be sure you test. Otherwise, it's disaster, particularly if you're going to do anything like an egg in aspic, because you try to unmold it and the aspic hasn't set, and it just collapses completely. And so now we have this large thing of aspic in here, and you put it into a smaller pan, just about as much as you're going to use, and that's all. And see, I've got ice in there, and I'm going to even put a little bit of more ice in. Before I started this, I put all the ice trays into a bag and put that in the freezer, so I had plenty of ice. And then you stir it over ice until it begins to get syrupy. If you put it on at this stage when it's still quite liquid, it just doesn't stick onto the duck. And if you used your great big pot of it, every time you got it to the syrupy stage, then when you were through, you'd have to melt it again, and then you'd have to put it back in ice again. So this is much the best system. And it inevitably happens when you've gotten your aspic to just the right stage. The telephone rings or the gas man comes. When I was doing that duck yesterday, I think I had to melt aspic 3 or 4 times before it was just right. Now that's cold and syrupy and almost set. And then, I'll move this ice away so you can see. And then you just spoon it over. The first coat never sticks very well. But as you can see, if the aspic were too liquid, it just wouldn't stick on at all. But this is just about right, and it may very possibly. Now, as you can see, it's getting a little bit too thick, but I can still spoon a little bit more on. But now it's gotten thick, so I have to heat it just a little bit. Stir it over, heat until it's liquefied again. You can see the reason why it's a good idea to have just a small quantity, because you can heat it so quickly. There. And you'll have to do, before you start the rest of your decorations, you probably do 2 or 3 coats of this jelly on the duck. And then, after you have about an 1/8 of an or 1/16 of an inch built up, you then can start with your decorations. I'm now going to put it in the refrigerator. This is sort of a game of back and forth to the refrigerator all the time. But with this kind of thing, you can start and stop anytime you want and then continue. I'm going to, while this is setting, it takes about 10 or 15 minutes for it to set. While this is setting, we will do a little bit on how to do fancy decorations. Because if you're an artistic type, it's a great deal of fun. You can use all of your ingenuity. Now, we're using a duck, but you could perfectly well use a cold roast chicken. You remember way back we did a casserole roast chicken with tarragon, and that is a lovely kind of a thing to decorate. Or the pate that we did last time. You can slice it and then pour the jelly over it and make wonderful decorations. So, here are a lot of decorative elements. We'll just use normal things. Now here, for green, this is a leek. Or you can use a green onion. And you cut off, let's see, you just cut off the green part and drop it in simmering water until it has become limp. And then, there it is, limp. And then you can cut it. I better put my glasses on, I think, and get a smaller knife. You just cut a strip like that. Then you get some almost set aspic. I'll pour a little bit in there. Now here's some aspic in a plate, which I thought would make it a little bit easier for you to see. And then use some needles. And then you lay it in. Like that. And then we're going to make, and this is an olive, and you use that for black. And we have carrot strips. You just peel a carrot with a vegetable peeler, and then drop that into simmering water until that's soft. And you can, if you have, there's those little cutters which you can buy at some fancy department stores, and you just make a little cutting like that. Oh, I didn't do that quite right. I have to push it down hard. And that makes like a little flower. There. Then you follow all along with that. And if you wanted something black, you can use a cutter like that or anything else. Or just chop it with a knife. See, there's your bit of black. Now, this egg See, I've decorated the bottom of the egg like that. Can you see? I've used exactly the same system. And you have your cold poached eggs, which you dry off, and you just put the egg in its best side up, and then pour in some cold aspic. And then put that in the refrigerator until it's set. Now I have one that's already been done, and I'm going to show you how to unmold it. This one's already been done. You see it's all set. And so you put it into simmering water for just about 3 or 4 seconds. Count 1, 2, 3. That's almost. When you see that the edge of it is just beginning to soften, then you put it into another dish like that. And there's always a little bit of melted aspic. That's why you use 2 dishes, and then just scoop it up onto your plate. There. Don't know if you can see that. I hope you can. It is a little design of clubs. And then you can do this ahead of time and then just refrigerate it when you're ready to serve. Refrigerate it until you're ready to serve, and there you are. It makes a lovely little first course or a decoration on a cold buffet. And now I think our duck is set, so we are ready to put on the final decorations. I'm just going to put this into the refrigerator. There's our duck, and we have cherries. These are pitted Bing cherries, which have been soaked in a little bit of cognac and lemon juice. Well, first we'll put one more layer of jelly onto that. Now that's set pretty well, so I'll put in a little softened. You can see if you have all of your ice and everything, this isn't too difficult to do. Now all these dribbles on the aspic we're going to cover up with chopped aspic, as you see. Now so you put on one coat of that, and then you'd chill it again until it was set, and then you'd be ready to put on your cherries. And just use your fingers and make any kind of a decoration you like. I'm just going to put them around this way. Do you remember the duck with orange we did the other way? That is lovely done in aspic. You do it the same way you put an orange slice between each bit of breast and orange over there. It's amazing when you start putting these decorations on how it improves the look of an otherwise naked platter. But duck with cherries is a lovely combination. You could also use fresh peaches. If you'd had fresh cherries, you'd pick them and then you'd cook them at just below the simmer for a few minutes in your consommé. There. And now you would spoon a little bit of your jelly over the cherries and then let that set. Because you want everything to glisten. And then when you've got this beautiful tasting jelly, it just makes a delicious dish. It's sort of like having a cold jellied consommé plus duck and cherries. Now we're going to do some chopped jelly. And that's what you fill up all the crevices with that you have. And so this is just this jellied consommé, which has been chilled in a platter, and then you just dig it out. And then chop it up. Now you can see why you want to test out your jelly before you do it, because if it weren't hard enough, you could never chop it. Then you just take a spoon, or you can, if you'd like, put it in a pastry bag. And you wouldn't think jelly would come out of a pastry bag, but it does perfectly well. And then this is sort of the artist's saving grace, this chopped jelly, because you cover up any dribbles or anything else that you've made with the jelly. And if you're using a pastry bag, you could outline all the duck pieces with it. Now, if you were doing your pate, you'd take a pastry bag and outline all the slices. And the more artistic you are, the more beautiful you can be. And just get any place that you feel needs a little decoration, you put the jelly in. I'm going to save that, and then we're going to do another nice trick. You can see this is lots of fun to do. Now we're going to put some diamonds of jelly all around. So this is another bit of jellied consommé which has been set, and then you just take a knife and cut down through it, and you can make any kind of shapes. I'll make some diamond ones. If you do straight like that, and then make cross hatchings that way. You can see why it's a good idea to have an awful lot of jelly so that you have everything you need. Now I had a little spatula here, which is good to get this off with. Then you just dig it up with your spatula and then lay it over like that. You wouldn't think when we first started with this rather dreary looking platter that it was going to turn out looking like this. And with your cherries, you probably wouldn't want any other kind of a decoration than just this. And the oranges, as you can imagine, would look perfectly lovely instead of the cherries there. There's a diamond on that, and then you can do anything with that you like. Maybe we ought to put one or two more cherries on. It just depends on how you feel about things. No, that sort of slides off, so I don't think I will put it on. I'll put some more diamonds across. Now, if you were doing your other decorations with the green leaf and the bits of yellow, that would be awfully nice for a chicken. You dip them in almost set jelly and then place them on, and then you put another coating of jelly on it. Now we can put some little, I might make some squares this time, and they can go around the edge of the platter. If you've ever been on an ocean liner, they just go mad with this kind of stuff. And you think, if you've never done it or seen it done, that you just would never be able to do it. But you can see it's not too difficult. There. If you're awfully clever, you could probably make some circles, but I've never been able to cut circles properly. There. So I think I have a pastry bag here. I think I'll put some jelly in so that you can see it really will work. Now we need a little bit more, so I'll just chop this up again. You sort of wouldn't think you could do all of this. like these bags very much. I once tried to use one of those tubes, which sounded like such a good idea, but I was never able to get anything into the tube. And this is so easy. You just turn it over and then spoon the jelly in. And then just squeeze it out. I think I can put a little bit more in. This jelly's awfully good to eat, too. You want to be sure that you have a lovely tasting jelly, because there's so much of it on the platter. If it didn't taste good, it would be just a waste of time and a great disappointment to your guests. Now, well, I'll put some over here. You see, that comes out perfectly well. If I'd chopped it up a little finer, I might make it just a little bit there. I always feel when you have all this jelly, you ought to use it for something. There. And now this can be done the day before you're going to serve. You could just oil some wax paper very lightly and then put it in the refrigerator. Because the duck is all covered with jelly, it doesn't dry out. So I'm going to put this in the refrigerator, and I will take out our original one. Nothing like having lots of lovely cold duck. Now, this is called, in French, canard à la Montmorency, which means simply duck with cherries. And we have our poached eggs in aspic, and some cold pate, and a green salad. We're having a champagne supper tonight. And here is our champagne. If you don't happen to like champagne, use a Sauterne or a Alsatian Gewürztraminer. You want something that has a good fruity flavor. Now, you don't really need any recipe to do this. All you have to remember is 1 envelope of powdered unflavored gelatin per 2 cups of consommé. And if it's in very hot weather in the summer, you might find that you needed only 1.5 cups of consommé. But the important thing is, be sure to test out your gelatin. Put it in a little saucer, put it in the refrigerator, and let it chill, and then beat it up a little bit and see if it holds its shape. I think it's a good idea to make the gelatin the day before, and then you don't have any worries or hurries. You're perfectly sure that it's exactly the way it should be. And then be sure that you have everything chilled, platters chilled, duck chilled, or chicken chilled, or whatever you're going to do. And then it works very quickly. Now, next time on the French Chef, we're going to do bouillabaisse, or French fish chowder. It's just a wonderful dish, and you can make it just as well in the USA as you can make it in France. So, that's all for today on the French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit!
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking. The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Safeway stores.